everyone, it's Mel here and welcome back to Mel's Blind Life, the YouTube channel where we discuss things all about blindness. Today I have got a guest with me and we are going to talk about guide dog handling experiences over the years and how things have changed and some sort of top tips from a guide dog handler who has had 6 guide dogs now. Hi, this is Mel Stevens. Welcome back to Mel's Blind Life, the YouTube channel all about blindness. Hey everyone, so this is my mum Kate. Hi Mum.
Hello Mel.
Mum has been on Mel's Blind Life before. She did a video, a guide dog tag. I will link that in the description down below. So Mum, you've had 6 dogs, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And you got your first dog?
In 1978.
And you have worked all through the same organisation?
Yes, always through Guide Dogs Victoria.
Who I will link their website down in the description down below. So my first question is, how has the training changed over the last multiple
years? Well, a couple of things that have changed. One is that we don't use correction or slip collars anymore. So the tendency now is more towards using a martingale, and if the dogs have any issues like distraction or sniffing, pulling, etc., it appears to be more common to use a gentle leader rather than to use a slip collar. So also, although we never corrected our dogs by choice, we used to use correction sparingly, but I've discovered that these days correction is basically not used at all. Mainly what you're using is waiting for a good behaviour and rewarding a good behaviour rather than trying to correct a bad behaviour. The dogs seem to be much gentler now, much more pliable, so much more able to be used by people, excuse me, scratching my nose, much more used by people who perhaps don't have a lot of dog handling experience, because the dogs are much more forgiving, I guess, of how you handle them, not requiring quite the discipline that we used to in the old days. I think also perhaps the training methods have become a lot softer and there's a lot more emphasis on food reward. We would never give our dogs food rewards, but now it seems that food reward is how most things are achieved. Of course, the training itself in terms of how long you spend in training has also changed considerably. When I got my first few dogs, you lived in at Guide Dogs and you were there 24/7 for the 4 weeks of your program. Was probably not until about my second or maybe even third dog that you would maybe go home on the 3rd weekend and then my last 2 dogs, you would go home every weekend and leave the dogs there and have to come back on Monday and start again. So different things like that. They've also reduced the amount of training that you actually get at the training centre now. Seem to be, although they don't call them a domiciliary program, they tend to maybe do 2, perhaps 3 weeks at the training centre now, and then instead of only doing maybe 1 week at home after 4 weeks at the training centre, they now seem to do 2 to 3 weeks at the training centre and maybe 4 to 6 weeks at home. So just depending on the client, of course, but so things have changed quite considerably in terms of the style of dog and the style of training and the way that the training is delivered.
So apart from the removal of the slip collar, has any of the equipment changed since 1970 something when you got your first dog?
Not significantly, though I suppose the difference is that instead of doing your belly strap up by a buckle like we used to, you now have a clip. There's been some different types of harnesses introduced, but I still stick with the old original style of guide dog harness. I think the handles, they used to be quite heavy. Now they're made of aluminium, so they're much, much lighter. And of course, when I got my first couple of dogs, there was no such thing as toilet harnesses. The first I ever saw of a toilet harness was one of the trainers. I think he trained me with either my second or third dog, I can't remember which now, had recently come back from Japan where they were using toilet harnesses quite a bit, and he first started introducing the toilet harnesses into Australia, and they were handmade by rope at the time.
Wow.
They were quite a different design. I was just sitting here while I was talking, thinking about it, and I think, if I remember rightly, it was a loop that went over the tail, and there was it had a cross piece sort of underneath it that sat under the tail, and it had 2 clips at the top edge of that cross piece, and then it had another cross piece a little bit further down with 2 clips on it, so that sort of made a square shape, if you like, that went over the essential parts. And then it had two straps that you put between the dog's legs and pulled up and put through the loop, and then had to tie it off. It was yes, it was quite quite cumbersome, we were lucky here in Guide Dogs Victoria that one of our guys had actually been to Japan and saw it and started introducing it, and a lot of us thought it was really good, especially the totalies, and especially those who sort of lived independently and didn't want to have to go out and try and clean up the backyard or whatever. That was something that was introduced and has changed quite considerably. I think I saw a recent one where it's not even a clip anymore. I think it's a magnet. The 2 parts of the harness magnetised. So that's changed a little bit, and different styles of harnesses. I haven't gone into all the different ones, but yeah.
So has anything so far as access changed? Do you find that you get refused in places less in 2019 you know, with this current dog that you've had for the last 6 years, than you did, say, with your first and second dogs?
Yes, I think access has improved. I actually can't remember this dog in my 6 years with him, and even perhaps the one before. I can't remember a recent time that I have been refused, whereas I can remember quite a few refusals with my third dog, my Mossy dog. We worked together for 10 years, and she and I got refused in quite a few places over the time, taxis and restaurants mainly. But I don't.
You had Mossy in between 80 something and 90 something.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was probably after her, through Binnie and Nerida and Sheik, things have gradually improved. And as I said, you know, even going to restaurants from all the various different ethnic backgrounds and things like that. You know, the closest I've come to a refusal with Sheik was, you know, people not understanding, and as soon as you explain that he's a guide dog and that he has the right to access, then all of those, and I think their main, I remember the one time that I had to explain it to a restaurant. Their main concern was getting the hair on the carpet. No, I don't think it was so much having him in the restaurant as him leaving hair on the carpet. So, yeah.
So, ignoring, you know, all of the specific dogs and their amazing capabilities and that, what is probably the favourite thing, the most memorable thing that you have done in the last many years of having a guide dog that you wouldn't have been so confident doing without a guide dog? Yeah.
So basically, I think for me, I like to travel. I like to go to different places. I like to explore, and I think for me, having the dog makes me much more confident to explore new places and different places, because I can focus on learning my orientation or following whatever orientation tool I'm using, whether it be a map in my head from people's descriptions, whether it be an app or a specialist orientation device. I find that having the ability to use that tool with the dog taking over the responsibility of actually physically getting me there, I think that's probably one of the biggest pluses of having a dog in a situation like mine where I like to travel and do different things.
So what are your 3 top tips on guide dogs, guide dog handling, etc., that you would give to someone, say, you know, my age or younger, sort of late teens, early 20s, who's considering getting a dog? What's some 3 tips or advice or something that you wish you'd known going into guide dogs that you've learnt since getting your first dog in 1978?
Well, I think the big issue that I had initially was expecting too much of the dog. You know, if you get a new dog, you're going to obviously be taking the dog to places that you know very well. And the one thing that you've got to understand is that the way you work in those places is now going to be quite different from how you used to work those spaces before. So, you know, you would walk to your local shops and you would use certain fences or certain textures on the ground or something that you could find with your cane to help you as a tool to get through that situation. And what you're going to learn is that the dog is not going to be interested in finding a fence that's got barbed wire across the top, or he's not going to be interested in looking for a certain thing. What he's interested in is the goal at the end. And you're going to have to find different ways of navigating spaces from your own orientation point of view when you have a dog. So the mistake I made, for instance, with one of my dogs was that I took her to a place that I knew very well. It was an extremely complex place, and I actually tried to get her to do too much in too short a time, and it didn't work. She kept on making mistakes because I was asking too much of her all at once. And I think that's the other thing. You've got to take a few steps back. For instance, you don't want to be, well, you know, you've been to uni three times, 3 years maybe you've been to uni, and in 4th year you've decided that you're going to get a dog. And your dog is not going to know that uni like you. And you've got to take a few steps back and go, well, I can only do A, B and C for the first 2 or 3 weeks. Let the dog be comfortable with A, B and C. So you might even have to choose what lectures you go to. If school's already started, you might actually have to choose what lectures you go to be able to cater for the dog, and you might have to compensate the other lectures by listening to them online or something like that. And then you, after, you know, a couple of weeks, right, the dog's really comfortable with A, B and C. Now I can add D and E. And then after another 3 or 4 weeks, he's doing A, B, C, D and E really good now. Let's add F and G. So just be prepared to take a step back, make some compensations for the dog needing to be comfortable with what it's doing and not giving it too much to handle all at once. And I think the other thing is, one of my instructors told me one time, and it is so true, I've seen it over and over and over and over again. So remember that our instructors, our puppy raisers, they spend up to 20, 22 months, whatever it is, getting our dogs to a standard that we get, where they are excellent workers, they are beautifully behaved at home, they don't have any toileting accidents or anything like that. They, you know, lie quietly either on their bed or under a chair while we eat our meals, etc., etc. They're beautifully behaved, they're well trained, they're good at their job. So that takes sometimes up to 22 months. But if we don't continue every single day with the discipline and the giving them the work to do, giving them the challenges and things like that, if we don't stay on top of their discipline and we don't give them the correct amount of work to do, it can take less than 6 weeks for us to completely ruin that 20 months worth of work. So your dog will, you know, so you feed your dog scraps from the table. So then you go out to a restaurant and the dog's there sticking his nose under your elbow or somebody else's elbow, wanting scraps from the table. You let the dog run you into a tree and you don't do something about it. So then you start running into more and more and more trees. And then you start running into other obstacles. Or you let your dog cross in front of a car And so, then when you get to a curb, the dog's not going to listen or watch out for any cars. Just little things that happen, your dog might start picking up things off the ground or whatever. So you just got to remember that the whole point of having the training for your 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it is when you get your new dog, the whole point is to give you a framework to work with your dog, not for a few months until, I can't be bothered doing that anymore, but to work with your dog for 10 years, still giving it the correct commands to go forward and back and left and right, still insisting that it sit on its mat when you don't want it to be hanging around your legs, still insisting that it lay quietly under the table, both at home and in restaurants. So that's really important to remember that, once you get the dog, it's your responsibility to maintain its behaviour and its abilities.
And what is your number one advice for someone who is in the situation that I am in now, going from one dog to another? What's your number one advice when you are moving on from one dog to another? Because you've done it a couple of times.
Once or twice.
So what's the main thing that you maybe didn't do that wish you had, or?
So I think after about my third dog, I finally realised that whenever you get a new dog, you've got to put aside everything and pretend to start from the beginning. As you get to know your dog, as you get to know the ways of your trainer, and as you get to understand how your dog was trained, what commands were used, and what he's been taught and what he hasn't been taught. Once you know the dog after, I'd say, a minimum 3 to 4 weeks, then you can start to bring in your knowledge, particularly any idiosyncrasies you might have that helps your dog. So for instance, when you've been working a dog for a long time, instead of walking to every single curb, you want to turn a particular corner, you might start saying, we're going to find the way left, or we're going to find the way right. You must remember, when you've got a brand new dog, that every curb has to be, you have to walk up to every single curb. You have to do your turns correctly. You can't take shortcuts until you've at least got to know your dog a little bit, because you've got to remember that this dog is trusting you as much as you are trusting it. So you're trusting the dog to take you safely from point A to point B, but the dog is trusting you to provide it with the support to achieve that goal. And if you don't use the correct commands, if you don't use the correct body positioning, and you start taking shortcuts and all that sort of stuff, when you've got a brand new dog, that's when you start breaking down all of that training, and you start making the dog anxious instead of building the dog's trust.
Okay. Well, anything else to add?
Enjoy your dog. Every single one of them. They all have a personality. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. And just learn your dog, and learn to accept it for its own strengths, weaknesses and personality, and don't try to make it into something or someone that it isn't. It's a little bit like, having friends and kids, I guess. Try to treat every single one of them for their own strengths and weaknesses, rather than trying to turn them all into the same person.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming in today, Mum. If you have enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, comment down below if you've got any questions or any comments that you'd like to say. Please remember to subscribe to my channel and click the bell notification to get more of my uploads, and we will see you in the next video. Bye guys!